Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host as always, Steve Hall, and we are going over the takeaways from episode 131 with Leigh Peele. Let's get into those takeaway points, guys. Takeaway point number one is for those of you who are struggling accepting going through a massing phase, whether you're female or male, it's a good idea to maybe look at a physique that you want to achieve and then realize that muscle gain is something that is going to be required to achieve that physique. So if you're a smaller female and you don't want to gain size, but then you have aspirations to look like someone who lifts, for example, then maybe you should reconcile the fact that you're going to have to go through a muscle growth phase and maybe have to mass up to achieve that physique. And that short term, you might have to settle for some fat gain, whilst in the long term, you're going to get to your overall goals. It's a great way to actually accept going into a massing phase that a lot of people struggle with. Takeaway point number two is mindset. When we're thinking about going through a cutting phase, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I'm suffering. This is so awful and bad. Better to rethink that and think about the cutting phase as something that you've chosen to do, that you're empowered to do, and that it's going to take you further towards your goals, and that actually it's something that is almost a pleasure because in the long run, you're going to be in a more positive position and have a really positive outlook and mindset towards this, and you'll be more likely to have a successful cut. Takeaway point number three is that it's really important to keep a healthy mindset and to also keep just a healthy entirety of what you're doing day to day to make cutting as successful as possible. Stress really negates a lot of the things that we're trying to do, especially when we're trying to lose fat. It just makes it all harder, and it also hides some progress sometimes when we get that associated water retention. By having time in your day to relax, to distress, to not cut out all your carbohydrates and pile on loads of cardio, you're going to have a much more successful and smooth cutting experience. Takeaway point number four was super interesting. If someone is very energetic, they burn through loads of energy as if they're driving very fast, they probably can benefit from having more frequent breaks, more frequent refueling periods where they need refeeds, for example. Whereas someone who is maybe a bit slower, a bit more mundane, a bit less energetic, driving a little bit slower, probably don't need to refuel quite as often, and they don't need to have those periods at maintenance or refeeds quite as often as that high energy type of person, and they won't benefit from them as much. Takeaway point number five is to do with identifying whether or not you're at or below your settling point. Your settling point is generally a position in which you feel good, where your body is actually happy at where it's at. This is a body fat percentage that most of you will probably be at most of the time, or should be. There are a few ways to identify whether or not you're at it or potentially below it. For example, if you're not sleeping well, if your hunger isn't well controlled, if you're not kind of reacting to medication or caffeine as you think you should, if your libido is a bit all over the place or maybe quite low, then likely you're not quite where your body wants to be. These things are kind of a bit all over the place. What you must remember also is that there's a physiological and psychological element to this, and it's just being aware of both of these to make sure that you're feeling as good as possible and give you your best self. Our favorite quote from today's podcast is that people don't struggle with deficits, they struggle with maintenance. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and takeaway points, definitely check out the full episode of the podcast with Leigh Peele. We really enjoy you guys giving your comments and feedback. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Please share this around. We always appreciate it. Cheers and revive stronger.